I'm Emily Mashak, and you're listening to Tuned In to NoCo, Town Square Media's show that lets you know what matters in NoCo. I'm talking today with Pam Jones, the interim executive director at Crossroads Safehouse. So thank you so much for joining me, Pam.
Thank you, Emily.
Of course. Now, for those who are unfamiliar, what is Crossroads Safehouse?
Crossroads Safehouse is a emergency shelter for victims of domestic violence and interpersonal abuse. We're located in Fort Collins, and we primarily serve the Fort Collins area, but some surrounds as we partner with other domestic violence shelters throughout northern Colorado and within Larimer County.
How did it come to be here in Fort Collins?
We actually celebrated our 40th anniversary last year in 2020. And in 1979, there was a group of concerned citizens who started to create a coalition around battered wives at the time, battered women, excuse me. And they pushed and pushed to create a shelter because they saw the need in the community. And then they partnered with the city of Fort Collins on a block grant. And in 1980, opened as a small house in Old Town with 4 rooms that were filled the same day that it was opened. Then Crossroads moved to different facilities from there. But in 2010, we received a donation from Columbine Health Systems of their building, a former assisted living facility. And that's a 29,000 square foot building we are in now. We currently reside in now, where we can accommodate 96 clients in shelter, and we have 31 rooms in that building. One thing I failed to mention earlier is that we have a prevention and outreach program too. So we do assist victims of domestic violence who may not come to shelter necessarily, but that we are helping in an outreach capacity. And then we do some prevention programming in the community as well. We're not just a shelter. We do include those 3 areas in our services, but we are most known for being a shelter.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't tend to think of Larimer County as a place where bad things happen. But how big of an issue really is domestic violence in our area?
Mm-hmm. We mirror national and even international trends in the numbers. It's estimated that 1 in 3 women will be victims of abuse, and 1 in 4 men, and some statistics even quote 1 in 3 men. So it is a pervasive issue. It's an issue that exists throughout the world and the nation, but in Colorado is no different. We have problems of our own, if you will, despite the fact that the city is by reputation and experience a wonderful place to be. We still have people that we need to assist with this problem. During the time of the pandemic, it has worsened because there has been more intensity around the problems as people have had to stay home, where typically their perpetrators are as well. And then it is intensified with other issues too, such as economic conditions, joblessness, or other things that exacerbate the stress in the home.
Right. And now I know that abuse comes in many forms, but what are signs that people can look out for, whether they're in the relationship themselves or looking out for a loved one?
So what can listeners do if they believe that they are in a situation of abuse? And know that abuse can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be sexual, it can be stalking, it can be financial, it can be spiritual. When we think of abuse, we think of it being actually more of a physical issue, but it's really much more than that. Abuse has everything to do with power and control, and what may I say a perpetrator does to force power and control over an intimate partner. Red flags can be such things as monitoring your phone, monitoring your email usage. It can be as severe as threatening someone with a weapon. If there are guns in the home, if there are other things that are used as a weapon or a threat, typically victims who are threatened with a weapon are 20 times more likely to be murdered by their perpetrator. So red flags can be monitoring, a lot of control. They can also be explosive behavior, behavior that seems to be escalating over time and becoming more intense. During this time of COVID, that has gotten exacerbated. Where we saw victims of domestic violence and interpersonal abuse prior to the pandemic, at Crossroads, our crisis calls year over year have gone up 50%. Where we saw 6 lethality cases a year, we now are seeing 3 to 4 a week. So just those two things can be one of the strongest indicators that we have that COVID is taking a toll on our victims, and it's bringing a lot of stress to our households in our area. Our shelter numbers went up 24% year over year. And in fact, as the pandemic began, it was quiet. It was rather quiet because everybody was trying to figure out what to do next. We didn't have enough information yet. No sooner did it begin that we had governor's orders to stay home. And so it was rather quiet in the shelter, yet the first quarter, Crossroads received an amazing number of shelter requests and shelter occupancy. But then that got quiet. And then as we understood more and more about what our lives were going to look like in 2020, we started to see more people come back to shelter. But the conditions of the domestic violence in the area and in really all over have gotten more intense with the pandemic. So red flags are really, when you think about power and control and what someone, what you are suffering as a result of that in an intimate relationship, then it's really time to at least seek some advice and advocacy. And one can do so by calling the numbers that I have mentioned previously. And that is just, you can contact Crossroads and any domestic violence shelter in the area through the crisis line and through the website to seek resources that are there too.
So obviously contacting Crossroads is a great way to help with this. But with these exacerbated problems in the pandemic, how can people still reach out and still seek help, even though they're not seeing people face to face like they normally would?
First off, if there is a great deal of control over a relationship, know that you've got a network in Fort Collins and surrounding Fort Collins in your domestic violence shelters, and you can call our emergency line. That is completely private, the crisis line is, and that is a great option because we always have a trained advocate 24/7, 365 days a year who can speak with you about the situation and help you sort out safety planning and other things that you can do to help yourself and to also get to a place where, particularly in an emergency, you can find safety. So you always have that but with COVID, unfortunately, it's been harder and harder they do think that there is a reporting lag because it's been harder and harder for victims to be able to be free and perhaps not overheard on the phone. So sometimes they will reach out to family and friends who will help as well. So that's something that people can do as well. Recognizing the signs is recognizing the red flags, and that can be the financially you're unable to access resources of the home because one person controls those completely without any freedom to do that. There's also sexual abuse. If there is a problem in that area, that is something that you should identify and make sure that you're very conscientious about how things are at home. But the best thing that you can do is use your resources, and that can be through family and friends, to find a way to talk with somebody about how you can plan for something different, for something that is toward a healthier state for yourself and your family. Other signs are emotional abuse, a greater deal of control perhaps over your phone, over maybe surveying your phone activity, and you know that any email that you send is being monitored in some way, but not monitored, monitored toward something that that you feel you cannot function as an independent human. So those are some things that to watch for during a time of COVID or not. It's just that during this time with the pandemic, where you could maybe freely leave the house even for a small bit of time, that is, we just can't circulate as we normally do, and there are not as many options.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned it earlier, but just to reiterate, how can women or men, any victims, reach out to Crossroads when they need to?
Well, definitely our website. So you want to go to crossroadssafehouse.org. And on that website, know that there is an exit button, and domestic violence shelters most provide these, where you could click on that if by chance you suspect that your internet usage is being accessed at the time. But if by phone, you can call our crisis line, and that number is 970-482-3502 or 888-541-SAFE 7233. That's a toll-free number. Either one of those, or you can access our website and use the exit button if needed.
Now, another important thing Crossroads does, as you mentioned, is prevention. We've already discussed the signs, but what do you really think is key to preventing things like this from happening in the future? And how can listeners educate themselves through Crossroads to help this happen?
Yeah. We have plenty of resources on our website, which are helpful. Something new that we are introducing to the community is we have a person that we have hired who will be doing outreach and prevention. Some of that will be online at this point in time, but we are going to build more of a program toward the end of prevention and community outreach in a way where we partner with our local organizations to tell our message, maybe go to where we are receiving the most phone calls, but people that do not come to shelter, people that need assistance, but outside of our organization, outside of our physical building. But prevention, we have a couple of different programs. We have a program called Time to Talk, It's not as, unfortunately, it's not as active right now during the pandemic, but we are putting together more of a digital and physical, eventually, program around that. And that's it's peer driven, and it's to help high schoolers learn more about healthy relationships, what they can do to identify red flags in a relationship, and start early on that. We'd like to reach back into junior high in that prevention program. But the more that we can reach our younger youth in the community, the better off we are to prevent incidences of domestic violence. Because what we need to do really is teach and educate and help people learn what it is to be in a healthy relationship, to try the best that they can to choose that. Other things that we're going to be doing in the prevention side, we've got an early notion about going into perhaps being more present in various neighborhoods and communities in Fort Collins, where we could be in place to not only do some of our outreach work, but do programming and educating around domestic violence issues, around healthy relationships for all ages. And then we can also be a little bit more, there are people that do not report, they're very reluctant to do so, that we never see at the shelter. Our goal in that program is to try and go to them. Mm-hmm. So it's in its very early stages, but we're excited about what that can become, to be the best possible community partner and to serve the victims in our community in a way that reaches them.
I'm sure after hearing this, there are a few listeners who want to help out and get involved. Is it possible for listeners to volunteer or donate to Crossroads?
Yes, definitely. That again is through our website, but then we've got an email related to it, or anybody can give us a call at any time to connect on our what we do for volunteers and donating. And our volunteer program, like many actually, and nationally and throughout the country and in Fort Collins, went from 96 people down to 43 and down to 20 in its most recent iteration. We don't think of that as anything but everybody's trying to keep themselves safe and unable, perhaps in their instance, to leave their homes, just unable to circulate as they did. So that being the case, we're really looking forward to bringing back our program. Meanwhile, we still have volunteers, and we still need a lot of assistance through our programs at the shelter. So as we find a way that they can work with our pandemic protocols that we have in place, and to keep everybody as safe, to provide a safe environment, we still have a very active volunteer program. It's just not as large as it used to be. But yes, simply by contacting Crossroads Safehouse, you can of course volunteer with us. And again, I said through the website, but you can also call 970-530-2353, and you can through that phone line learn more about volunteering with us. And then as far as donations go, the best possible thing that we, like many nonprofits, can receive are gifts, financial gifts, donations of dollars that will go toward our services. We, again, like many nonprofits, our fundraising programs are critical to what we do. We also, gift cards are an excellent option as well for our clients. if you're showing up at 3 a.m. in the morning with your family and you've only been able to grab one personal item, obviously you are going to have some needs related, and that can be very helpful. But we do strongly suggest King Soopers and Safeway, Walmart, Target, and then gifts of clothes and other items. We have families in shelter all the time. Rarely do we just have adults in shelter. We typically have families there too. And so we have an in-house boutique where people can reprovision, if you will, their clothes. We also have kitchen facilities. The food bank is a great partner to Crossroads in that they supply some of our food supplies for our pantry that provision each of the kitchens that we have in our shelter. So we don't necessarily take donations of food, but we will definitely take donations of clothes, other items for any age, those types of things to provision the boutique and to make sure that we're supplying those items to some of our outreach clients too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pam. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. It was great to learn about Crossroads and all that you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily.
Again, that was Pam Jones, the interim executive director at Crossroads Safehouse. Learn more and get help if you need it at crossroadssafehouse.org.